Welcome to the Wayback Music Machine podcast, the weekly show that takes a lighthearted look at the week that was in rock and roll history. And Aaron, we've got another interesting road trip, don't we, today?
We do. And you know what I like about our show more than anything, besides the fact that we're very good friends and we get along, but you know what I like?
What's that?
Is sometimes we pick the odd story. We don't pick always the obvious stories, right? You know what I mean?
Well, that's right. And we do a little digging on this show and sometimes come up with ones that are just would make for great conversation or just interesting period, you know?
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, we had been talking before we started recording today, though, that a little bit of a death theme going through the show, isn't there?
It's kind of, yeah, but we'll let people figure that out as we talk. But yeah, we couldn't get around one of them. It's too big, so...
No, absolutely. So let's hit the road. Maps?
Check.
Snacks?
Double check.
Tunes?
Check.
I'm Tony Stewart.
I'm Aaron Badgley.
And we are cruising the rock and roll highway in our Wayback Music Machine. Are you ready, my friend?
I sure am.
I have the feeling this is going to be the start of a great adventure.
Kind of a magical mystery tour.
Somehow I knew you were going to say that.
So this is the big one we couldn't avoid, and it's actually very hard for me to talk about, to be perfectly honest, but we're heading to Los Angeles on November the 29th, 2001.
Yeah, this one is hard for me to talk about as well, because, you know, he was my favorite member of the Fab Four.
It's a tough one.
It is, but let's head back to L.A. and find out the story. Normally, I love visiting L.A., but under these circumstances, not so much. It's November the 29th, 2001, and the world has just found out that the quiet Beatle, George Harrison, has passed away at the age of 58 from lung cancer. And what a sad day this was.
Sad story. I mean, you think 58 is so bloody young when you got... You know, I just saw Bob Dylan, and he's 80 years old. I mean, it's so young, and yeah, it was a very sad day. It was, you know, he had just released the All Things Must Pass reissue with the new version of My Sweet Lord on it. Yeah, I have to say, Tony, this is not a good one.
No, not at all. But like you say, it was the one that we couldn't avoid. But I always found George Harrison's career trajectory so fascinating that. For the longest time in the Beatles, right, he was always in the wings waiting, you know, and overshadowed by Paul McCartney and John Lennon, but finally came into his own, especially on the Abbey Road album and going forward from there. And what a great songwriter he turned out to be.
Well, I think if you're going to be overshadowed by anybody, they're pretty good. You know that I have to tell you that we could have tried to keep this a bit light, but do you know the funny story about Sinatra doing something in concert? Did you ever hear that story?
Well, I know Sinatra said that it was, you know, maybe the greatest love song ever written, but I don't know the rest of the story.
So Harrison's there, and Sinatra goes, not only is this the greatest love song Lennon and McCartney have ever written?
Oh, no! Oh, no!
It's like, no, it's my song, you know.
You know, at least he got one out of two. It is maybe the greatest love song ever written, but...
It could be.
Oh, man. Oh,
that's what happens when you're in the Beatles. People just make that assumption, right?
Well, exactly. But he really came into his own. And again, I always found it fascinating that he was the first one out of the gate with a solo album.
Well, yeah. Well, actually, you're right. In 1968, he put out a solo album called Wonderwall Music, soundtrack to a film. But he was the first solo Beatle to have a number one single and a number one album, All Things Must Pass, and the worldwide hit My Sweet Lord.
Well, that's right.
And then following that, he did the concert for Bangladesh, for which he won Grammys, another number one. Oh, and you know, All Things Must Pass is the first triple album by an artist to go to number one.
Yeah, so nobody, I don't think anybody would have saw that coming from George, you know? I mean, I think people knew that he was becoming an excellent songwriter, but to make a statement like that right out of the gate after the group had broken up, and, you know, it was amazing.
Well, again, as you say, it was unexpected. I mean, it's funny because if you look at the years from 70 to 75, the two most successful solo Beatles were Ringo and George, which Lennon wasn't doing. After Imagine, Lennon was kind of plummeting with Sometime in New York City and stuff. But here's George and Ringo just knocking out them hits, right? So, yeah, it was kind of interesting. But, and then also, let's not forget, he had his third album after the Beatles broke up, Living in the Material World, made #1 as well, with a #1 single, Give Me Love, Give Me Peace on Earth.
Yeah, I always loved George's stuff after he left the Beatles, and I loved even the Traveling Wilbury days. Yeah.
Those two albums are just, it's like a dream band. Dylan, Harrison, Jeff Lynne, Tom Petty.
Yeah, fantastic, eh?
And Roy for the first album. Fantastic band. Fantastic albums. They're just so great.
They are fantastic. And you know what I watched the other day, which just made me smile, was the video for When We Was Fab.
It's so funny you say that because I actually put that on the Spotify playlist for the show.
Oh, did you?
See, we think along the same. That's a great video with Ringo in it. And yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's terrific. And makes me smile every time I watch it, But I always, for me, love George. I've always, always, always loved George. And just something about his writing and his demeanor and his everything about him.
Well, and he also, he received the first Billboard Century Artist Award when the Billboard decided to do that. And the reason he received it, for all those reasons you just mentioned, but also because he really single-handedly introduced the world to world music. I mean, long before Peter Gabriel and WOMAD, and long before reggae made a big splash. How's that for a good use of words? He was out there with the Indian music, and that changed the world. And also I read an article about how he introduced North America to yoga.
Oh,
and
wow.
meditation, right? So, yeah, he was a pretty influential guy, and you're a big fan of the Concert for George film too, aren't you?
Oh my gosh, yes, huge fan. And I mean Billy Preston when he covers My Sweet Lord, I'm smiling like a teenager here,
He's smiling right now, folks. He really is.
Yeah, what a great try. How can you not smile at that performance?
How can you say the words Billy Preston and not smile?
Well, exactly. My favorite part of that concert is whenever they cut to Danny Harrison, George's son, and George has just got Danny's got the biggest grin on his face the whole thing. He's like, I cannot believe I'm on stage with these guys.
I know, and they're just, McCartney and Ringo, Gary Brooker from Procol Harum, Billy Preston, Eric Clapton. It's just a superstar. It's a great, and it's filmed beautifully too, by the way. If you haven't seen it, folks, get a copy. It's well worth seeing.
So well worth it. Now, what would have been on the charts here?
Well, before we do the charts, I want to mention one thing that's kind of interesting. This day also was the day that Harrison released his last original song. He wrote a song for a guy named Jules Holland, who's a big name in England. Jules Holland had an album called Small World, Big Band, and Harrison wrote and recorded a song called Horse to Water in his home for that album, and that was the last thing he ever released. So.
Oh, wow.
But I got to tell you, the reason I bring it up is because Harrison changed his publishing company for that one song. So when I got the CD, it said published by R.I.P. Music.
Oh, no.
I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
I thought there's Harrison's humor right there.
Well, that's right. Very self-deprecating, right? So
always. So the charts, my friend, the top 5 albums that week were pretty interesting. Number 5 is a woman who I simply adore, Anya. An album called A Day Without Rain, which is a fantastic album.
I remember that one. Yeah.
Enrique Iglesias, Escape. He escaped from people's attention after that one.
Nice one.
Thank you. A person we're going to be talking about in a minute, Michael Jackson, was at number 3 with his album at the time called Invincible. Number 2, Pink Floyd, Echoes, the best of Pink Floyd. And number 1, a woman who's in the news these days, Britney Spears, with her album Britney.
Well, and also, not only was she a chart-topping singer, but she also taught about semiconductor physics. Do you remember that episode?
Who can forget? I can't.
So that's in our back catalog, folks. That's maybe 4 or 5 episodes ago.
Yeah.
But, give it a listen. That is maybe the oddest story we've ever done on this show. It's got to be right up there.
And I may have stayed in math if she had taught me physics, science. Oh my gosh, that's so funny, Tony. Yep, she's a nuclear physicist as well as a pop singer and a diva. No, Britney Spears, #1 with her album Britney.
Okay, so there you go. Now, speaking of #1s, boy, how's that for a segue into the next road trip?
I was waiting for you. Fantastic.
We are going to be talking about the king of #1s here. So why don't we punch it in? We're going to the November 30th, 1982 for an absolutely monstrous album release. And of course, we're talking about Michael Jackson's Thriller. So what city would be going to here?
Los Angeles. We're going to stay in Los Angeles.
Oh, we're going to stay in Los Angeles. Well, that's fantastic. So here we go. November the 30th, 1982.
So here we are in Los Angeles, and an album is going to be launched, or as they say, dropped today. An album called Thriller by Michael Jackson. And it's going to go on to be one of the biggest selling pop albums of all time. And later on, Tony, I'm going to tell you, well, actually, I'll do it now. This is Beatle related because the very first single released off the album, and it came out before the album was released, it's probably my least favorite Paul McCartney song of all time, The Girl Is Mine.
Yeah, that's a bit of a stinker, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a rough one. I don't know. I don't know what to say. Michael had covered a McCartney song on Off the Wall album, a song called Girlfriend. I don't know what Paul was thinking, because Say, Say, Say is a very, very, very good song. Mm-hmm. But The Girl Is Mine, not so much.
Yeah, not their finest work for sure. But
no.
So Thriller, went on to become, I think it's the #1 pop album of all time, but #2 in the States, right, I believe?
I think so. I think the Eagles' Greatest Hits took it over, did it not?
It took it over in the States, but I'm not sure about worldwide sales.
I'd have to check that out.
I was looking at the numbers today, and it said the Eagles was 38 times platinum, and Thriller was 34 times platinum in the States.
Right.
But in terms of worldwide sales, I think Thriller was around 66 million, so pushing 70 million units. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And I think it still sells or gets streamed to every Halloween for sure,
Well, absolutely. And what an album. Michael Jackson, of course, it had been a few years since he'd done his last one. And he had Quincy Jones again producing this album. So this was his 6th studio album. But, you're the chart guy, right? How many weeks was it on #1? It was insane.
37 weeks. You couldn't get it off the #1 position. And one of the reasons, Tony, was the sheer volume of singles that came off that album. The Girl Is Mine, Beat It, Billie Jean, Pretty Young Thing, Thriller the song. It was like, it's a greatest hits album.
Yeah, basically it is, right? I think, what they do, seven singles at least off that album.
It was crazy, right? And at one point, you put in the notes here that at one point this album was selling 1 million copies a week.
Isn't that incredible? Yeah, after his, do you remember when he did Billie Jean at the Apollo Theater show?
For the Motown, it was a Motown special, was it not?
That's right. Do you remember he introduced the Moonwalk there?
The Moonwalk, that was huge, yeah.
Yeah, so that pumped new life into this album, and at that point it was selling 1 million copies a week. And it's amazing.
But what's interesting about the album, Tony, is the volume of guests he had on it, like Paul McCartney. But who else did he have on it?
Well, he had Eddie Van Halen on there, and of course, doing guitar work for him, right? And then Steve Lukather was on there on Billie Jean, and some amazing collaborations. But my favorite collaboration on the album was not really a musical one, was Vincent Price in Thriller.
I'm going to have to go with you on that. What a treat to hear Vincent Price, and what a treat to hear it on an album like Thriller, Didn't see that coming at all.
No, not at all. And of course, not only commercial success, but this album 8 Grammy Awards in 1984. So, it just cleaned up, right?
That's a bit weird, though, isn't it? Why was it 2 years before that? I guess the timing of the release, it didn't make it for the 83 awards.
Must
so it
not have, I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess it was still on the charts, but isn't that incredible? And 8 Grammy Awards. And the other legacy that Michael Jackson left was, this was among the first albums, right, to use videos as promotional tools. He really took advantage of that medium to promote his work. And I mean, that soon became standard practice, but this was one of the first ones to really do that for all of those singles.
And to his credit, when you talk about the videos, he let Weird Al use the same set for Eat It.
Yes, that's fantastic, isn't it?
I mean, everything's the same. If you watch Weird Al's video, it's to the letter. It's beautiful. And I love the song Eat It, by the way. I think it's brilliant.
And I know Michael thought it was hilarious.
Well, how could you not?
Yeah.
I mean, how could you not find that funny? Because, even his follow-up, which is Bad, when Weird Al did a takeoff on the song Bad, right? I mean, it's too funny. I love Weird Al. I have a soft spot for him anyways.
Oh, me too. So yeah, Thriller was the big story that year in music, and incredible. Of course, the Thriller song itself, the video for that clocks in 13, 14 minutes. It's a short movie.
Well, it was a short film. I mean, it was one of the first to do that, where you have a bit of story leading up to. And I remember how, and I hate to use this word because it's overused, but revolutionary that video was when it came out. It was like watching a mini horror film.
Oh, absolutely. And I love going back and watching that.
Yeah.
Now, you were looking at the singles charts that week, right?
Well, what's interesting, that week when the album came out, for the second week on the charts, Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson, The Girl Is Mine, was at number 9. But in the top 5 singles that week is a song that sadly has gotten lost over time, and I love this song. Neil Diamond's Heartlight. Do you remember that?
I do. That's a great song.
Do you know that? I'm going to digress for a second. The interesting history about that song is that it's about E.T., and Spielberg wouldn't let him use the name E.T., so he had to get around it by writing a song about a heartlight. So there you go.
Oh, wow.
What's wrong with Steven Spielberg? Joe Cocker and Jennifer Warnes is number 4 with Up Where We Belong, and that had been number 1 previously.
And that was written by Buffy St. Marie. Did you know that?
Isn't that wild?
It is.
It's kept her comfortable for her life, right?
Well, that's right.
Have you ever seen her sing it?
Buffy? No, I haven't.
Oh, I'll send you a link. It's quite good. It's really good.
Yeah.
Number 3 was Olivia Newton-John with Heart Attack. I don't even remember the song, to be perfectly honest.
I don't remember that one either, no.
Number 2, I have a huge crush on Laura Branigan. I know she's no longer with us, but I loved her. Gloria, number 2.
That's a fantastic song.
Oh, yeah. Great song. It comes from Italy, right? Originally. So, there you go. And number 1, Lionel Richie with Truly. Another, he was still on Motown at the time, but it was interesting that Michael, who was no longer on Motown, there's a couple of Motown artists still making it big, Yeah, now I have to say, Lionel Richie, I didn't really dig his stuff post-Commodores as much, but that's just me. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that, but... I liked about 3 songs that I thought were... I like Say You, Say Me. I thought that was a good song. Although I prefer the Simpsons version, Beer You, Beer Me. But, no, I'm not a huge... Actually, and after he left the Commodores, they released a really great single called Night Shift, which was a tribute.
That's a fantastic song. Yeah, what a great song.
I love that song. I thought that was like one of their best ever songs. But yeah, anyways, we digress, folks. But anyways, yes. So that was the top 5. Interesting top 5 at the time, right?
Oh, very, very interesting. Now we are going overseas next. We're going to Switzerland. And this is an occasion and an incident that got immortalized in song. And we're going to go over to Montreux. So are you ready to punch it in? It's December 4th, 1971. So here we go.
Can we get to... Is Toblerone bars invented then?
Oh, you know what? I bet you they are. So we'll pick up a great 1971 Toblerone bar and see if it's still fresh in 2021.
You know, Tony, lots of events have been immortalized in rock and roll songs. I think one of the most famous is by Deep Purple, a song called Smoke on the Water, and it's about the Montreux Casino in Switzerland that burnt to the ground during a show by Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention.
Yeah, and so Smoke on the Water talks about that right in the lyrics, right? I mean, they actually mention Zappa's name right in the lyrics, and that had become the site in 1967 of the Montreux Jazz Festival, and what a story, eh? The casino caught fire. There were people inside who managed to get rescued, and there's also a Beatles connection that evening as well, but it was Frank Zappa during his show, and the casino caught fire. Do you know how it caught fire? I'm not sure if I ever found that out.
Yeah, it's kind of, if it's okay to say a fire is ever funny, it's kind of funny. So the Mothers of Invention, Frank Zappa's band, were performing King Kong, which is a great song, by the way. And it's about 80 minutes into the show. And the synthesizer keyboardist, Don Preston, was doing a solo, and someone shot off a flare gun. I guess, okay. Because it was something to do. Back in my day, we had beach balls, but, well, we're not Swiss. And the flare hit the wooden roof, and I guess the wood was dry and old, and... But I liked what Frank Zappa said. I love Zappa. I'm a huge fan. They were very organized, he said in an interview after the fire. I was just so lucky that many of the fans were able to speak English because I didn't know what to say to them in French.
Oh, my goodness.
It's such a classic Zappa thing.
But
right?
I can just picture this in my mind, right? Him being up on stage and flames and smoke and like, okay.
Well, that week goes down in Frank Zappa history as being a rather awful week, because 6 days later after the fire, he's performing at the Rainbow Theatre in London. And during the encore, he's doing a kind of a sarcastic, but I've heard it's not that sarcastic, a cover of I Want to Hold Your Hand. And a guy named Trevor Charles Howell jumps on the stage and throws him off the stage, pushes him right off.
Oh,
and he breaks his leg, and he really hurt himself after that. He couldn't stand for about a year.
Oh, that's nuts, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm a Beatle fan. I hate when people butcher Beatle songs too. But two things. One, it's Frank Zappa. Two, it's Frank Zappa.
Oh, that's right. And, Smoke on the Water, right? That iconic guitar riff that I think is maybe one of the first ones that every guitar player learns, just based on a blues scale. But you hear it. It's the first thing on most guitars' wish list of songs they want to learn, right?
I think you and Rick should do a version of it.
I'm wondering how that would go off, because it would be so recognizable right away.
It would be. It would be really, you know what? It would be really cool. I'm being serious now for a second. It would be super cool to hear.
It would be interesting for sure, as long as nobody pushed us off the stage.
I don't know many Deep Purple fans who have the strength. Get their walkers out. Just kidding.
Oh, that's right. Now, there is a Paul McCartney connection here as well, right? So,
well, he was playing across the street, right?
Yeah, right across from the ruins. So can you imagine that?
So McCartney is on tour for the first time with his brand new band Wings, and I've included a song from that tour so fans can hear what McCartney sounded like in 70. It's a bit rough. It's not the smooth McCartney we all know and love. But the other thing that's interesting, Tony, there's a Beatle connect. McCartney keeps popping up here, right? Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
The other thing that's kind of interesting, and you put in your notes, that a recording of the outbreak and the fire announcement can be found on a Frank Zappa bootleg, right?
Yeah, which is amazing, isn't it?
But what's even funnier is that Zappa in the early 90s was kind of fed up with these bootlegs. So he decided to take all the bootlegs and basically reissued them himself. He out-bootlegged the bootleggers. He kept the same covers. Everything was exactly the same, except it was on his own label. And he said, go ahead and sue me. Go ahead.
Exactly. That kind of reminds me of what Taylor Swift is doing right now, right? With her old masters. Have you heard about that?
I'm not clear about the whole story. Do you know what's going on? Is she re-recording or something?
Yeah, because she wants the rights to her masters. And
okay.
And so one of the ways that she can get them is if she just re-records everything. And so she's doing it. She's going through her entire back catalog and re-recording everything. Isn't that impressive?
Wow. And it's doing well, because I saw that her new one actually made #1 on Billboard again.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's how strongly she believes in that. And good for her. That is a huge undertaking.
It is. And it's hard. I would think, you're a musician. Is it not hard to kind of keep going back and doing the thing over again and trying to match it?
Well, trying to match it would be one thing, and also the fact that you've grown as a songwriter. So you're going back now and looking at a tune that maybe you'd be cringing over because you were much younger when you wrote it, right?
Yeah, wouldn't you want to change a few words or notes or something?
Well, that's the thing. I think that urge would be overwhelming. So I'm wondering what she's doing, whether she's being like note for note faithful or not, you know?
I don't know. It's interesting that her and Adele changing spots at #1 right now.
Well, that's right. But now on the chart, oh, wait, there is another connection here, right? Another weird coincidence that you would put in the notes on.
It's kind of odd that this was also the day, December 3rd, 1993, when Zappa passed away. It was on the 22nd anniversary of this fire, which was kind of weird that he would die on that specific day. But
yeah, that's a little bit of a creepy coincidence, isn't it?
Yeah, just after he did the bootleg thing. But yeah, it's sad. I miss Zappa too. He was, you know what? Google some of his interviews, folks, and he makes a lot of sense. You may not be a big fan of his music, but when he talks, he does make sense. Well,
and I always loved his testimony before the PMRC. Remember back in the 80s?
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
really good.
Him and John Denver.
Of all people.
Yeah, because they expected Denver to walk in there and toe the party line, and he ripped into them even more than Zappa did. It was unbelievable. Unbelievable.
But I did like Zappa and Denver after they're being interviewed after saying, where was Prince? Where was Madonna? Where were all these people who are being censored? Why aren't they here? Mm-hmm. Why is it up to John Denver, of all people, and Frank Zappa? You know?
Yeah, a fascinating time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, which charts did you pick for this week?
Well, this week I did a UK top 5, just because I thought it was, I don't know, we're in Europe anyways, and it was a very interesting top 5. Number 5 was a group called T-Rex with Electric Warrior.
Okay,
that's Mark Bolan. Yeah. Number 4, John Lennon. You might remember him. He was in a band called the Beatles with an album called Imagine. Emerson, Lake and Palmer were number 3, Pictures at an Exhibition.
Okay.
Number 2 is interesting. It's Top of the Pops 20, but what it is actually studio musicians recreating the hits of the time. So it's not the actual artists. It's covers of top hits at that time.
Oh, wow.
And number 1 was, and this is how it's listed, it's Led Zeppelin 4. But if you look at the actual chart, it says Led Zeppelin, the new album.
Oh.
Because they didn't know what to call it, right? Interestingly, in America, number 1 was Santana, and number 5 was Carole King, Imagine was at number 6, and 7 is your favorite, Chicago at Carnegie Hall. But you know what? I brought this up because we've talked about this before, but 71 was such an incredible year for music. And in England at the time, you had Elvis in the top 100, Carole King with Tapestry, Santana, Jim Reeves, a Christmas album, and one of my favorite folk bands, Lindisfarne. So just an interesting chart, you know?
Well, absolutely. And one of the things I was noticing on this chart is it was actually one of the weeks in 1971 where Tapestry wasn't number 1, right? So.
Well, and that's what Thriller, I mean, the Tapestry was the Thriller of its day, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, it was the best-selling album of all time for a little while anyway.
Yeah, until Saturday Night Fever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to go back to the present and do our new segment. It's called From Memphis to Motown, and we're going to be talking about Memphis. This is such a great story that we had to talk about it because it happened this week in rock and roll history. So you're ready to head home and we'll just chat about some Memphis news that happened this week in rock history?
Absolutely.
Okay, here we go. So this is our new segment called From Memphis to Motown, and we're going to take a look at Elvis Presley this week, but not just Elvis Presley. This is the week that the so-called $1 Million Quartet, it was an impromptu jam session that took place at Sun Studios, and it had Elvis Presley there, Jerry Lee Lewis, Johnny Cash, and Carl Perkins. I mean, what a lineup. Absolutely incredible. And this jam session, thank goodness, the guy in the booth had the foresight to record this thing, right? Because, man.
But you know what? It's interesting is that it sat unreleased for so many years.
Yeah. I mean, you would think that they would have got that out as quickly as possible, but they recorded 47 different tracks, like little snippets. Some of them were snippets and some of them were full songs, but incredible. It was the day Carl Perkins was there to record. And then
he was, yeah.
And then Johnny Cash. Now, Johnny Cash, in his recollection, says that he was there the whole time because he wanted to watch Carl Perkins record. But then Elvis Presley swung by with his girlfriend. He by this time, he was an RCA artist, but he had swung by just to say hi to the gang. And of course, there's Carl Perkins, Johnny Cash, and Jerry Lee. And so the four of them get together and singing a wide mix of songs, too. Some gospel, some country, a little bit of rockabilly type stuff, but really interesting mix of tunes.
White Christmas, for whatever reason. Yeah. I have in your notes, you mentioned that it was released in 81 on what I call a budget label from the UK. And I actually have that album on vinyl. I kept it all these years from 81. And it's not the full, I think since then, the whole session has been released on perhaps a box set or something. But it's fun to listen to. And we were talking about this when we were putting the show together, is Elvis plays piano.
Yeah, I guess some of the gospel-y type tunes, right? Because there's the iconic photo that came out of that session actually shows Elvis Presley at the piano. There's that one photo that everybody, but they quickly they called down to one of the newspapers in Memphis and said, "Hey, these guys are doing this recording session," and they very quickly nicknamed them the $1 Million Quartet. And what a day that must have been. Just so much fun for those guys.
And in the 80s they tried to recreate it with, instead of Elvis, because Elvis has passed away, they got Roy Orbison. So it was Johnny Cash, Roy Orbison, Carl Perkins, and Jerry Lee, and it wasn't the same, mainly because it was so planned. And what makes this so special is it was just four guys hanging out.
And you can hear the chatter and the chatter, and it's so fascinating. To be a fly on the wall at that session would have been unbelievable.
Well, I think a lot of the recording, I feel like a fly on the wall. Like it's so intimate. Like these guys, it's like you're spying on four guys just hanging out, and I love that. I love that about that recording. And can I just ask you a question though?
Yeah.
If someone said to you 40 years ago that Jerry Lee would outlive them all.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, what are the odds, right?
Seriously. And I like the fact that he put an album out not too long ago, maybe 5 years ago, called Last Man Standing.
Now there's a great quote from Elvis about Jerry Lee Lewis here. Elvis had gone into the control room because near the end of the session, Jerry Lee took over on the piano, and he was doing his Jerry Lee thing, of course. And Presley commented to Bob Johnson, he said, and this is the quote, "He could go. I think he's got a great future ahead of him. He has a different style, and the way that he plays piano gets inside me. So high praise from the king for sure." And well, of course, Jerry Lee was pegged to be the heir apparent until he self-destructed, right?
And boy, did he self-destruct.
Yeah, I mean, that would be an entire episode.
You know what? It's a book, How to Self-Destruct in 5 Easy Lessons. That was just...
And in 2 weeks, right? Like that's...
Oh, yeah.
I still astounded by that, going from $10,000 a gig to not even being able to make $250.
Well, yeah.
In 2 weeks. Talk about a fall from grace, right? So.
Oh, no. A fall from grace is one thing. This was a nosedive into oblivion. Like he blew up his career in 2
absolutely.
weeks.
He had some moderate success as a country artist in the 60s, but certainly that was it. He was supposed to be the heir apparent. I mean, everybody was saying that, and that's the way it goes, right? I guess when you marry your 13-year-old cousin. So,
well, and the other tragedy, I don't even know how to follow that up. The other tragedy, the other one that was destined for greatness was Carl Perkins, and he was on his way to Ed Sullivan, but got into a very bad car accident, and Elvis took his place doing Blue Suede Shoes, and Elvis had the hit, not Carl, and that was it for Carl. He never really rebounded in terms of commercial success, which is a shame, because he was I love Carl.
Yeah, me too. And actually, Sam Phillips, I remember seeing an interview with Sam Phillips, and he actually said he liked Carl Perkins' version of Blue Suede Shoes more than Elvis's, so that's interesting as well.
I love them both. I think they're both, and they are different. I mean, Elvis certainly put his Elvis thing on it, but I like them both. I think they're both wonderful. But poor Carl. Anyways, there you go.
But that was one of the speaking of the Elvis thing that he put on songs. In these sessions, when you listen to it, it's just Elvis being a guy having a good time, right? He's not so much putting on the Elvis thing. He's just there with three buddies having a great time. It's so fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great album. I love listening to it every so often. It's a good one to have.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what, Aaron? I think we're coming to the end of the road trip here, but
yeah, sadly.
I'd like to thank everybody out there for listening and for sharing the show. We really, really appreciate it. Everything that you do to help us out, and it's always nice to know that people are listening and enjoying what we do, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we should say hi to Michelle D.
Yeah,
who shares our show every week, and she says it brings her. She uses it to walk and go for walks. Great. You know what? Put us on while we walk. We're a great company. We really are.
Yes, Michelle, thanks so much for doing that. And I like this idea of every few episodes or so we should give a shout out to a super fan. Why not?
Why not, indeed? Why not? Hey, listen, remind me to grab my Toblerone when I get out of the truck, okay?
Well, that's right. And you know what? When you crack that bad boy open, let me know if it's still fresh.
If I survive.
All right. Have a good week, my friend.
You too.
Music for today's episode of the Wayback Music Machine podcast was written by Rick Denis. The show notes, chart selection, and Spotify playlist were created by Aaron Badgley.
And the artwork, recording, editing, and sound production was done by Tony Stewart. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to tell a friend or two. And don't forget to click follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast player to get the latest episodes automatically.
And we'd love it if you would leave us a review. You can also engage with the show by going on our website and leaving us a voicemail. We may even play your voicemail on an upcoming episode.
Thanks for taking this road trip with us, and we'll see you next time on the Wayback Music Machine podcast.
Hey, turn the radio up. I love this song. The Wayback Music Machine podcast is a Stewie Tunes production.